A 38-year-old pediatric nurse named Sarah Klein was clutching a lukewarm coffee in seat 14 degrees Celsius, absently tracing the edge of an old silver compass in her pocket, when she looked out the window and saw fuel streaming from the right wing like tears down glass. How does a woman who left the chaos of emergency rooms 3 years ago become the only person on a packed transatlantic flight who understands exactly what that shimmering trail really means? Before we go further, drop a comment below. Have you ever been in a moment where you had to choose between what was safe and what was right? And if stories like this are what you're here for, subscribe. More coming. Because this wasn't just a mechanical problem. This was a plane carrying 187 souls, and Sarah Klein was about to discover that some knowledge refuses to stay buried. To everyone else on Flight 472 from Chicago to London, Sarah was exactly what she appeared to be: pleasant, quiet, unremarkable. The kind of passenger flight attendants smiled at politely but didn't really see. She wore a soft gray sweater, no makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. When the man in 14 billions offered to lift her bag into the overhead bin, he did it with that gentle, slightly patronizing tone people use with women they assume need protecting. "You travel light," he said, clicking the bin shut. Smart. She thanked him with a small smile and settled in. In the terminal earlier, she had done what she always did: watched the families. A little boy in a dinosaur shirt had dropped his toy plane. Sarah picked it up, wiped it off, and handed it back with the same steady voice she used with her patients. His mother had given her that look. The "you're so good at what you do" look. The one that really meant, "This is all we expect from someone like you." Alone for a moment, at her gate, Sarah had pulled out the small silver compass her mentor had given her 15 years ago. The engraving on the back was worn almost smooth. "True north is inside." She ran her thumb over it, the way she had 1,000 times when the hospital became too loud, too heavy, too full of things she couldn't fix. Then she slipped it back into her pocket and boarded, like everyone else. Now, as the plane pushed back from the gate and the safety video played, Sarah leaned her head against the seat, eyes half closed. On the surface, she looked calm. Underneath, something uneasy stirred. Old instincts she had deliberately quieted, whispering that the air felt just a little too still. Sarah wasn't always a pediatric nurse checking fevers and reading storybooks. 15 years earlier, fresh out of nursing school, she had followed Dr. Margaret Hale into the world of disaster response. Margaret, tough, no-nonsense, voice like gravel wrapped in velvet, had taken Sarah under her wing when no one else would. Memory came in fragments now. The smell of diesel and rain on a training tarmac at night. Margaret's hands guiding hers over a mock-up of aircraft wiring. The way the older woman would press 2 fingers against a dummy's neck and say, "Don't trust the monitors first. Trust the body. The body always tells the truth." Sarah had asked once, exhausted after a 12-hour simulation, "When will I ever need to know this?" Margaret had looked at her for a long moment, rain dripping from the brim of her cap. "You'll know. And when you do, everything changes." They trained in heat, in cold, in smoke-filled rooms. Sarah learned how fuel behaves at altitude, how pressure drops affect bleeding, how panic spreads faster than any fire. She learned to listen to engines the way she listened to heartbeats, small changes that meant everything. One night after a particularly brutal drill, Margaret had pressed the silver compass into Sarah's palm. "True north is inside," she said. "Don't lose it when the world tilts." Sarah had eventually walked away from that life. The constant emergencies hollowed her out. She chose the gentle rhythm of pediatric care instead. But the knowledge stayed with her, sleeping just beneath the surface. Back in seat 14C, the first faint vibration ran through the floor. Sarah's eyes opened. A flight attendant walked past, smiling the professional smile. Everything still looked normal. But Sarah's hand closed around the compass in her pocket, and the first thin ribbon of fuel streaked past her window. It was a clear night over the Atlantic, the kind of night where the moon painted silver edges on the clouds below, and the cabin lights were dimmed for sleep. The air inside smelled of coffee, warm bread from the dinner service, and that faint recycled scent all long-haul flights carry. In row 12, an older British couple, the Harrisons, were sharing headphones, laughing softly at something on their screen. In 15A, a young father named Marcus cradled his sleeping 6-year-old daughter Mia against his chest, one hand protectively over her ear as if he could shield her from the engine noise. The flight attendants moved with practiced ease, clearing trays, offering water. Sarah noticed a small flicker in the wing light, there and gone. She blinked, told herself it was nothing. Just fatigue, just imagination. Everything felt routine. Safe. Ordinary. Nothing that looks fine is always fine. The first wrong note came quietly. Another thin stream of fuel, brighter this time, catching moonlight like liquid mercury. Sarah sat up straighter. No one else seemed to notice. Am I imagining this? Then the seatbelt sign dinged on. A flight attendant's voice came over the speakers, calm, professional, asking everyone to return to their seats. The pilot mentioned a minor technical issue. Standard procedure, but Sarah saw the attendant's hands tremble slightly as she collected a last cup. The plane shuddered harder. An acrid smell drifted through the cabin. Passengers began shifting, murmuring. The captain's voice returned, tighter now. Oxygen masks dropped. The world tilted from inconvenience into emergency faster than anyone could process. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She could stay in her seat. Stay invisible. Let the professionals handle it. Or she could stand up and become the person everyone would look to, the person she had tried so hard not to be anymore. Stay with me here, because what happens in the next few minutes is the part nobody talks about. And once you hear it, you won't forget it. Think about what you would have done in their position. Hold that thought. We'll come back to it. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up in seat 14. The nearest flight attendant reached her in seconds. Ma'am, you need to sit down right now. Sarah kept her voice low, steady. Fuel is pouring from the right wing. We're losing it fast. I need to speak to the captain. Gentle dismissal. We have procedures for this. Please return to your seat. Firm refusal came from the senior purser, who hurried back. Miss, I appreciate your concern, but we cannot have passengers interfering. Then the alternative failed. The plane dropped suddenly. Someone screamed. The purser's face went pale, as warning lights must have flooded the cockpit. Sarah spoke clearly, loud enough for those nearby to hear. The fuel imbalance is already affecting the ailerons. If we don't cross-feed the remaining tanks and adjust trim within the next 10 minutes, we lose control authority. Ask the captain what the fuel quantity indicator is showing on tank 3. The purser stared. Sarah reached into her pocket, pulled out the silver compass, and pressed it into the woman's hand for just a second, steadying her own fingers as much as the other woman's. My name is Sarah Klein. I trained under Margaret Hale in disaster aviation response. I know what I'm seeing. A beat of silence. Then the purser's eyes changed. She keyed her intercom. The weight of that decision hung between them. Trust given to a stranger in a gray sweater. Sarah glanced at little Mia in 15A, the girl's eyes wide with fear, and something fierce settled in her chest. This was what was truly at stake. Sarah moved forward with the purser, hands shaking until she gripped the cockpit door frame. The moment she stepped inside, her breath steadied. The instruments glowed red and amber. The smell of tension and warm electronics filled the small space. The captain, a man in his 50s with sweat beading on his forehead, looked at her once and made the call. Talk to me. Sarah's voice came clear. We're losing fuel from a wing breach. Cross-feed from left to right. Reduce power on the right engine gradually. We need to maintain balance, or we'll roll. Margaret's voice arrived in her memory. Exact words from years ago. The body tells the truth before the instruments do. She assessed quickly. Limited time. No margin for error. Resources, 2 pilots, limited fuel, a cabin full of terrified people, and her own hands. Step by step, she guided them. Each adjustment had a reason. Each reading carried meaning. The first officer's voice shifted from doubt to sharp focus. The captain listened, then acted. Mid-execution, the unexpected hit. A secondary electrical failure from the fuel loss. Warning lights they had never seen in training. The plane began a slow, terrifying yaw. Sarah didn't reach for a manual. She reached for something human. She spoke to the captain the way Margaret once spoke to her. Calm, direct, personal. Breathe with me. We've got this. Tell me what the rudder feels like. The captain exhaled. The unexpected tenderness came when the first officer, young, scared, briefly touched Sarah's shoulder as she leaned between the seats. A silent thank you passing between two people holding an entire plane together with focus and fear. They corrected. Slowly, painfully. The prophetic line returned as they approached final descent, the runway lights visible but the plane still heavy and unbalanced. Sarah whispered it under her breath. You'll know. And when you do, everything changes. Maximum doubt hit when the right engine stuttered. For 3 long heartbeats, it seemed they would lose it completely. Sarah's legs felt weak, but they held. Resolution was imperfect. They landed hard. Tires screamed. Emergency vehicles waited. The plane shuddered to a stop, and for one full breath, silence filled the cockpit before cheers and sobs broke from the cabin behind them. Sarah's hands shook so badly she could barely unclasp them from the seat she had gripped during rollout. Her legs felt like water. An unexpected urge to both laugh and cry rose in her throat at the same time. The first person to speak was the captain. He turned in his seat, eyes red, and simply said, "Thank you, Sarah." The words carried the weight of 187 lives. The purser, who had first doubted her, now stood in the doorway, tears tracking down her face. She didn't speak. She just reached out and squeezed Sarah's arm, once firmly, before turning to help passengers. Little Mia, still in her father's arms, looked at Sarah with wide, wondering eyes and whispered, "You fixed the plane." Her father could only nod, voice gone. Official response came quickly. Professional voices on the radio, ground crew moving with purpose. But underneath it all was raw gratitude that showed in every glance, every careful hand guiding passengers off. Hours later, in a quiet corner of the airport medical area, Sarah found herself face to face with an older woman who had been waiting. Margaret Hale. She had been notified somehow, the way mentors always seem to appear when truly needed. No grand words. Margaret simply pulled Sarah into a hug that smelled of the same rain-soaked training fields from years ago. They held each other without speaking for a long time. Recognition passed between them. Quiet, complete. Sarah reached into her pocket and took out the silver compass. In her palm now, it no longer felt like a reminder of what she had left behind. It felt like proof of what she had carried all along. For one moment, before the world of statements and interviews arrived, Sarah stood alone by a window, watching the grounded plane under bright airport lights, breathing like a person who had just remembered who she was. Weeks later, Sarah was back in the pediatric ward. The children still smiled at her the same way. Parents still gave her the "you're so good at what you do" look. But she moved differently now, steadier, quieter in her certainty. One quiet evening, she visited Margaret at the old training facility. Same tarmac, same smell of rain and fuel. They sat on a bench, watching the lights of a departing plane climb into the night. Margaret spoke softly. "That day, did you choose to stand up? Or did standing up finally choose you?" Sarah turned the silver compass over in her hands. Its meaning had changed completely. No longer just a keepsake of the past, but a map for whatever came next. Was she ready for that moment on the plane? Or did the moment make her ready? Leave your answer below. I genuinely read every comment. Margaret smiled faintly. The truth is, maybe both. And maybe that's what courage really is. Not being ready, but showing up anyway when the world tilts. If this story moved you, I have more where this came from. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And leave a comment below telling me which moment in this story stayed with you. I genuinely want to know. Some knowledge sleeps inside us until the moment it is needed. And when it wakes, it doesn't just save lives. It reminds us who we've been all along.